really are. One of the biggest problems is the success of the internet, frankly. We had a gentleman on the show just a couple of weeks ago who wrote a book called Trillions as part of the research that he's been doing, and he is drawing a future picture here of what the world will look like when there are trillions of devices on the internet. Well, we're not getting there without a little bit of work along the way, because part of the problem we have is that the Internet Protocol was designed years ago. So we have invited here John Curran with us. He's a VP over at ARIN. This is the American Registry for Internet Numbers. We're going to talk with him a little bit about the problem that the Internet has, and it's a very big problem. Some of you might have already noticed a few changes. I know all of my clients have been ready for these changes now for a couple of years. We were involved with a huge test that occurred. We'll talk about that and all the different things that are going on out there with John. Welcome to Tech Talk with Craig Peterson.
Thank you, Craig, for having me.
So I'm going to stop the recording there. Your volume was really low there, much lower than when we were just talking earlier.
Hang on. Let me reposition my phone to get a little closer to my mouth. How's that?
That's good. I'm going to increase the gain.
And I'll speak up a bit.
Yeah. Project from the diaphragm.
Exactly.
Okay, so talk a little more for me.
Okay. John Curran. This is John Curran, President and CEO of ARIN, the American Registry for Internet Numbers.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to talk a little bit about what's happening on the Internet.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so John, welcome to Tech Talk with Craig Peterson.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
Well, you have been busy for a while. We talked with you a couple of years back. I introduced you as a VP. You're actually president of ARIN. We sat down and talked about the problem that was coming and some of the solutions that were underway. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this? Basically, every device on the internet has to have an address, and we're running out of those, at least the old ones.
That's exactly the case. When the Internet was developed, and this was back in the 70s, the way computers talk to computers is they use addresses, computer addresses, what we call IP addresses, Internet Protocol addresses. The Internet Protocol is the protocol that's used between computers to talk to each other. So when they were in developing the Internet Protocol, they had to decide, well, we want to have a fixed length there. How big should we be? How many computers would be connected to the Internet at the same time? And so when they were developing this, the decision was made, because there were computers back then that were 8-bit and 16-bit computers, that they would push it to the limit, and they would use a 32-bit address. 32-bit addresses allow for 4.3 billion computers, different combinations of ones and zeros, and so it seemed like a very safe decision back then. And in fact, the Internet has grown remarkably well. That version of the Internet Protocol that was used to build the Internet and get it out there is Internet Protocol version 4, or IPv4. So whenever someone says, you're connected to the network, here's your address, and they give you an Internet address, they're probably talking about IP version 4. So the only challenge we have is we've been more successful than anyone ever intended. Mm-hmm. And in fact, 4.3 billion computers is actually something we're going to achieve in the very near future.
So now we have the problem of addressing these new computers. Of course, the internet address isn't something people think of. You mentioned here, John, that it's the ones and zeros. We think of a website, for instance, we go to, so we type in a name, but that name is translated into these addresses. And there were a number of different solutions on the table over the years. In fact, most of the big providers out there, such as your cell phone companies and many cable home units for getting the internet, are using kind of a stopgap measure here. They're using network address translation, but there's much better technology that's already being deployed.
Right. Let me talk a little bit about that. The fact is that most people don't see the numbers, as you said. We type in the names of websites. So type in our .com or our .gov or .org and type in to reach a company or an organization. Behind the scene, the computer translates that name into the IP address where that particular server with that particular website is located. Well, that means that we have the ability to actually change the format of the numbers, and it won't change the names that people type in. So Tech Talk will still be Tech Talk, and IBM.com will be IBM.com, et cetera, et cetera. Behind the scenes, it will map to a new address or an additional address. And those new addresses, we've actually known about this problem for decades. In the early 90s, before even the web was popular, when the Internet was just people sending mail and files, we looked at the rate of Internet growth and realized, wow, we have a problem. We're going to run out of Internet addresses somewhere in the early 21st century, 2010, 2015 or so. And so we started in the early 90s, in 1993, 94, the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, which develops the Internet protocols, started an initiative for a new Internet protocol. And in fact, that was actually standardized and officially adopted as the replacement protocol. Now, this still uses the same email that you use. Your mail client doesn't change. Your web browser and web servers don't change. Everything's the same, but it uses different addresses. And so your computer has to be configured with that address, and I'll talk more about that. The new protocol is called IP version 6, or IPv6, and it's actually being used right now. People don't realize if you go to a conference or you connect to a Wi-Fi network, you might be using the new protocol. The big thing about IP version 6 is it has more addresses. It identifies computers by 128-bit address as opposed to 32 bits. Every time you add another bit, you double the number of possible computers. Well, so 128-bit address is a lot bigger than a 32-bit address. To give you an idea how much bigger, 340 trillion computers are available with IP version 6. So hopefully we'll never have to do this change again. But we're right now in the middle of the transition from these old IP addresses, IP version 4, to the new ones, IP version 6.
We're speaking right now with John Curran. He's president over at ARIN. These are the guys who basically run all of the numbers here in the United States, help coordinate worldwide here. You'll find them online at ARIN.net, ARIN, the American Registry for Internet Numbers. And we're talking about the big change that's underway on the Internet. Now, as we have mentioned, much of this change is kind of behind the scenes. It's not something that most people have to worry about. But we are running out of numbers in certain parts of the world. They have run out of new addresses to issue. So, John, who gets the addresses? Who is asking for the addresses to be issued? And the bottom line here, this is a problem businesses have to take a look at.
Very much so. So if you think about the role of an Internet service provider, an ISP, connecting homes and businesses to the Internet, as they connect these homes and businesses, they have to use IP addresses to uniquely identify the computers in each one. Now, for a home user, they might use only one IP address. But for business, if you have 50 desks, they might use, 128 addresses, so you have a few spare and ability to grow. So as the Internet grows and more organizations are connected, more homes are connected, more mobile phones are connected, ISPs go through Internet addresses and need more to keep growing their business. They come back to ARIN and get another block of IP addresses. And we've been doing this, ARIN's been doing it for more than a decade, making sure that they've used their last block and issuing their next one. But the reality is we're running out. We're down to the bottom of the supply in the ARIN region, which is Canada, U.S., and parts of the Caribbean. In Asia Pacific and in Europe, they have run out. And so when service providers go back, there's literally no more addresses for those businesses to connect up new customers. That's a big issue. So what Internet service providers have been doing is beginning to deploy the new Internet protocol, IPv6, and using that to connect, for example, mobile customers who won't realize they're using IP version 6 because the service providers will also translate that in their own central offices, in their own networks, when it needs to be translated back to IP version 4. The reason it affects everyone, though, is that if you have a website that has, for example, information about your company available online, or you have podcasts, you have audio and video podcasts available. Well, the performance that someone gets going to your information, when someone goes to your website and tries to use your application or download your content or view your web page, if your website's only reachable with IP version 4, the old Internet protocol, and the person's coming in on a mobile phone using the new Internet protocol, it's not going to perform as well because every packet in that video or audio is going to have to be translated. So if you're going to put a website on the Internet, put it on the entire Internet. Make sure your servers are reachable via both IP version 4 and IP version 6. That way you have the best performance regardless of how the customer is connecting.
Makes a lot of sense. It's not that hard to do. If you have a computer that has been built here in the last 5 years, or an operating system, even Microsoft now has support in there for IP version 6. This is becoming critical, and as John just mentioned, whether you are a business who is trying to get information out, you're a blogger, you might be a podcaster, whatever it might be, you need to make sure that your ISP or your own company who is hosting that website is IPv6 capable and compatible. There was a big test that occurred in June of 2012 here, the World IPv6 Day. Many ISPs and some of the big websites participated. Some of them even dropped support for the IPv4 momentarily to see how things worked, and we are well on the way. You can find out a lot more by going to ARIN's website at ARIN.net, the American Registry for Internet Numbers. As an average user, just make sure you are running a latest version of the operating system, whether you're Mac OS or a Linux or Microsoft. If you are running the latest code, you're probably just fine. John, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
John Curran has been our guest, ARIN.net, and of course he is their president. Stick around. We'll be right back with more Tech Talk with Craig Peterson. All right, we got it. There's 12 minutes.
There you go. Well, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I hope it's helpful too. I appreciate it, John.
It should be. Thank you for your time, and it's been very good.
Thanks. You're very welcome. Take care.